On this channel, we focus on a lot of mechanistic, nuanced diet stuff, and that's great. But let's be very real here. When we're looking at what influences obesity and metabolic damage, we have to look at sociodemographic factors. So I have 5 key sociodemographic factors that have changed since 1990 that are probably influencing the way that we are today in terms of obesity and metabolic health. So since 1990, what has changed in the way of sociodemographic stuff and socioeconomic stuff that makes us eat certain ways? Let's dive in. After today's video, I put a link down below for Sundays. If you have dogs like I do, then Sundays is a really cool human grade dog food. I know it sounds funny, but I have dogs, so it's near and dear to me. They've been a sponsor on this channel for a long time. So human grade dog food means that you could literally eat it. It's not animal grade. It's food that is designed for humans because personally, I like to feed my dogs what I would eat. I don't want to feed them a lower quality. So it was formulated by veterinarians, really cool product, and that link down below gets you a special discount. I highly recommend that you check them out. Bottom line is that our dogs deserve good stuff. So that link is in the top line of the description underneath this video, and a big thank you to Sundays for the continued support of this channel. The first sociodemographic thing that has changed is the age of retirement. So 30 years ago, the average age of retirement was 62. Now, here we are today, it's 65. Doesn't sound like much, it's 3 years. Well, that 3 years is pretty darn important. Now, you might be thinking, well, they're retiring. Does that mean they're gonna be more sedentary? Isn't the fact that they're working later in life better? Well, had this been 30, 40 years ago, I would say yes, because most people were doing active jobs, where actually working more would mean that they were active more. But that's not the case today. And it's not looking like it's gonna change anytime soon. People are working later and later and later in life. But unfortunately, they're working desk jobs. We don't have nearly as many manufacturing jobs because that's been outsourced to robotics and whatnot. So people are now sitting in stressful desk jobs, not being able to actually move around. And then by the time they do retire, they've reached this point where their metabolic health is in such decline, they're probably going to be less active. This is a huge thing when we look at overall health span. Right? It's not just about obesity, it's about how long someone can continue to thrive, right? So that 3-year gap may not sound like much, but if you can get out of that desk job at 62 and still have a few years to restore your metabolic health, that's pretty darn important. Now, along with this, number 2, there has been a pretty significant decline in the amount of walking that we do as a society, but specifically in older people. So compared to 1990, for instance, people are walking significantly less between the ages of 60 and 80. So we run into an even bigger problem there. When people need it the most, they're not walking as much. Now, it goes without saying that walking is important, right? But walking when it comes down to metabolic health and managing obesity, let's look at the different things that make it amazing. For one, it's passive. So you're burning calories when you don't even realize it. So you're just going and walking to the store and things like that. That's tremendous. 2, it's predominantly utilizing fat as a fuel source because it's just low intensity. Those low intensity fat burning zones are very zone 1 to zone 2 aerobic zones where your body is almost exclusively utilizing fats. A, that's good for managing your weight, but B, it also builds that aerobic base that conditions your body to utilize fats more efficiently anyway. If your body is always trying to utilize carbohydrates and isn't efficient at utilizing fats, you're at risk of chronic fatigue as well, okay? Then, of course, it's low impact, all these different things. Low impact, but it also can improve the bone density, so you're not going to become frail when you're older. So we need to change our environment so that we continue to walk as much as possible. Number 3, this is a big one, and it's a very scary one to talk about. The marketing to children has increased significantly. Now, in Europe, there are a lot of guidelines that really restrict food companies from marketing to children. And if they do, it's in pretty select situations. Some countries ban it entirely. Bottom line is, in the United States, it's just no holds bars. It's go all the way, right? So we run into some issues with this. There's a study that was published in Nutrients. Now, this study flat out said that it is, quote, widely acknowledged that marketing to children is a huge risk factor for childhood obesity. So it's widely acknowledged that this is a problem. Okay, we're marketing to children. And then this study took a look at 71 different studies. It was a meta-analysis, and it found that predominantly TV and movie ads, but also just the product packaging, were the strongest influencing factors on whether children wanted to eat a food or not. Okay, so if they saw it on TV or the package was bright, that's mainly what made a kid want to eat it. Now, of course, the parents are in charge, but if you're a parent, you know that it's easier said than done. Like if you're arguing with your kid in the store, yeah, I could see you succumb to the pressure of that, right? But fortunately, there's better options that are coming out that are still like the fun colors and get that going, and I can appreciate that as a dad. But the marketing to children has just escalated it and ramped up, and it goes right in line with our rates of obesity. Next up is going to be the cultural norms, the peer pressure, what is talked about as being the right kind of diet. I want to talk about one thing that people don't always focus on, and that is the peer pressure into alternative diets. There's a lot of talk about, hey, we shouldn't be like forcing people to eat a certain way or to be restrictive, yet at the same time, we have crowds like a lot of the plant-based crowd, unfortunately. I talk to a lot of plant-based people and I create plant-based content for some people, but I have to be real when I say that some of that crowd really like scares people into going that direction and eliminating some foods, not necessarily meat, but sometimes eggs, sometimes dairy, things that could be very nutritious for them, and it forces them to have no choice but to go into processed foods. I know plenty of vegans that eat healthy, but the people that run around in my circle in the health world are usually educated health people. You talk to 95% of the vegans, they're gonna opt for a bagel and some like dairy-free cream cheese and a Pop-Tart because it's easier to go for that than it is to try to like get the quinoa and the beans and this and that and all the prep. I don't blame them at that rate. But by demonizing and these peer pressures to eat a certain way, what we do is we just funnel people right into these hyper-palatable processed foods. We also have this interesting like cultural phenomenon right now where obesity is considered healthy. Body image is one thing. Be comfortable in your skin. But most obese people that I know do not think that it's healthy, and they don't want to be that way. They feel every fiber of their being is telling them that this feels uncomfortable, it feels unhealthy, they feel sick, they don't like it. But then you have a weird cultural pressure telling them to not feel that way, when in reality, they're not doing it to change their body so much as they are doing it just to feel good. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's something like 5% of obese people can be what is called metabolically healthy obesity, or have metabolically healthy obesity. Very, very rare that you're gonna come across someone that is morbidly obese or obese that is also metabolically healthy, okay? So with this, we need to create sort of a buffer and a barrier around ourselves. We need to dig a moat. You need to know what feels good for you up here and somehow block those cultural norms that pressure us, because these are huge and they've changed exponentially since 1990 because of the advent of social media. But of course, just things are louder and more in our face now. Next up is probably one of the biggest one. That is the socioeconomic piece, and also race and education, okay? There are some interesting studies that actually looked directly at this. The one study in particular was published in the BMJ, and it took a look at 21 different studies aggregating to over 1.2 million people. They looked at like low neighborhood socioeconomic status compared to like normal income neighborhoods, all this stuff. And they found some pretty interesting things. The lower the socioeconomic status, there was a 45% increased risk of obesity. You can't argue with that. That's large data. Now, you could go into this saying, well, that doesn't tell us everything, it's correlation. But it's a big correlation. And then you can break down the nuances of it. Okay, are people in like a lower income neighborhood, are they less likely to walk because it's dangerous, right? Maybe they don't want to walk around because there's fear of actually getting hurt. Okay, is it the fact that hyper-palatable processed foods are heavily marketed as being affordable? If you walk into a Dollar General or a Dollar Tree, Most of the food there is going to be garbage. Can you find good stuff? Sure, you can. But most of it is going to be the processed garbage. There's also an interesting discussion that's starting to be had now, and that's surrounding the world of a stressful environment. So when people are in a lower income situation, their chronically high levels of stress are impacting not only their dietary choices, but just their cortisol levels and a number of factors that can influence obesity as well. Not just metabolically, but also psychologically in the kinds of foods that we choose. There's a lot of literature to suggest that when we are in stressful situations, we tend to opt for junk food because it satisfies all kinds of different coping mechanisms for us. So we cannot deny that stuff. The best thing that we can do is, especially in these socioeconomic kind of settings, when like low income areas, low income neighborhoods, low income type stores, where you're gonna see a lot of this profile, these are the kinds of places where we need to start voting with our dollars for the healthier options. If you buy those things that are healthy, they will continue to stock those things. So you have to make the decisions. But there also needs to be more affordable processed food that is healthy, right? Because right now, if you go to like a Sprouts or a Costco, there are better for you processed options, but they're expensive. Like they're processed foods for people that have money, let's face it. But you are gonna see them buying the Kraft mac and cheese that's bright orange and yellow because it's right in your face and it's affordable at $1.99, right? So we need to change as much as we can from the bottom up if you wanna be able to change a generation. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.